Hey, you're listening to B3, the Blue Banner's official podcast at the University of North Carolina at Asheville. I'm Nick, and I'm part of the media team for the Blue Banner.
I'm James Hughes. I'm part of the multimedia team. Here with us to talk about protests and rallies, our guest speaker, Benat Quartararo.
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going good.
Yeah, going great. We've noticed here locally, protest rallies have been making front page news, not just here in Asheville, but also across the world, especially the day of the inauguration. Benat, I see that you are a seasoned vet, as I would call it, with these protests, with these rallies. Could you elaborate a little more on what brought you to this kind of motivation?
I live in Raleigh, so
919 represent.
Oh yeah. I spent all last summer. I don't have a job, so I just spent it, doing martial arts stuff and mostly organizing for Air Horn Orchestra, which took place every Wednesday night from 6 to 6:15, 6:30 if we're really feeling gutsy, outside the governor's mansion, because a lot of people did not really like HB2, the bathroom bill, as a lot of people know it.
The backlash was immense.
It was. We had a lot of members of the LGBTQ community out there. It hurt us. That's an ethical dilemma, but also economically. So we'd bring drum sets, air horns, shakers, pots and pans, whatever people had to make noise, and play it outside. The orchestra outside McCrory's office, his mansion. And multiple times in the media, he was like, they're very rude, they're swearing. No one swore, no one was mean. These are honestly, it was led by two people who, quite frankly, are far less radical than I am. I mean, very nice, very respectful. So, we got a permit. The cops across the street, very, very nice. Had them, gave them the earplugs. So we kept it in the news, in the media. Beyond that, in the NCGA protests last December, my family was there for a week from the morning until we would be asked to leave in the evening, and I almost got arrested twice.
Wow! Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm a loud person. I can be, at least. So a lot of times, because I have a large lung capacity and a deep voice, people would say, oh, you should lead the chant. So it would just sort of at least be screaming, and not screaming, but very, very loud chanting. And the legislators would definitely hear us because they kept looking up. And the head of security for the building came and grabbed my arm and said, you have been asked to leave multiple times. And no one had asked me to leave. No one said anything to me. And I was saved, and you're immediately escorted out of the building. And my mother came to my rescue and said, "That's my boy." And
that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
You
no,
always have to trust the mom.
Oh yeah, no, I'm an only child, so I'm the
shout out moms everywhere.
Oh yeah, love moms, love your mom.
Oh.
So what we actually did was we went downstairs and led that chant with Reverend Barber down there. So because he then had to leave, so he told the rest of us to carry his torch, because he had been upstairs knocking on the door of the legislature, and dozens of other people had done the same, because it's the people's house and we should be allowed in to know what our legislators are doing.
Right.
So
and that's a beautiful metaphor going on outside too. The people making noise by making noise and bringing attention to that issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
noise is powerful, man.
Absolutely.
I wanna bring it back just a little bit. You mentioned the media before. It's my opinion that the media plays the single most important role in like sort of these modern protests, because that's who shapes the public opinion on what's going on.
Absolutely.
How do you think, or rather, what are some ways that you work with the media to help engender a broader message? And also, what are some ways that media maybe comes down on you guys that you've seen personally?
Well, I mean, it helps to have people in your group that are from the media.
Right.
The people who organized Air Horn Orchestra were actually editors of the Indie at the time. So, which is a pretty significant progressive publication, a news outlet in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. So they've since left, and I am not going to comment on the current state of that publication.
Yeah, probably best to leave that alone.
Yeah, but quite frankly, that's who the legislators, no matter what level, their staffers will bring them reports about that. So it's not so much that, yes, call your congressman, your senator, your city councilman, but the media are the people who it'll ultimately filter to them, through the media. And that's why it's important to make sure that you have a clear message, so the media cannot dilute that. And because a lot of times they will.
Absolutely.
You have a clear message, and because I think that size, the size of your group, yes, that's important, but that can sometimes compensate for a lack of a clear message. But for example, I'd say that size versus message, the Women's March was insanely huge, and that's
Absolutely.
awesome. But we need to take that kind of size and that level of power, and we need to really apply it to a single, maybe not a handful of messages that really resonate, because it was more of a show of force, and I think an organizational power that America hasn't seen in a very long time. So, for example, look at the Tea Party. You agree with these people or not? Most people didn't, but they've kept Obama. They kept Obamacare. They kept anti-Obama sentiment in the media, in the heads of legislators for years. And what was it, 2010, that they ousted all those people and brought in the Freedom Caucus and Ted Cruz. So I think that the left, because quite frankly, that's who I'm with. Sorry guys.
Don't be sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Asheville. I betrayed you.
I think
deeply conservative campus. I think that we need to bring it back and bring the energy back, because that's really how you get things done. You go out in the street, because it's not just a choice between protest and electoral organizing. You need both. You don't choose one. So,
does that come from organization from the top? How do you get that power together on one idea, going forward to one direction?
Yeah, who's the main organizers?
A lot of the Raleigh stuff, all this stuff across the state, the whole Southeast, and that's the nation has been led and organized by Reverend Barber and his people, and because he preaches essentially a Christian left message of advocating for the poor, for the underprivileged, and for a more just and equal society.
So a great man.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
fantastic man.
Brilliant speaker. Will bring you to tears. But a lot of it is kind of organic with Facebook and stuff. Right now, I am currently part of a socialist reading group of people who are local leftists, and all, but people who are just curious. A guy was sitting and listening to our conversation, and I noticed that, and I waved him over, and he just joined, and now he's signed up. So
it's a very grassroots approach.
Oh, very. So what we're ultimately looking to do is to make this a Democratic Socialists of America chapter, and start organizing for that, and to put in local legislators who more accurately reflect progressive and leftist politics, and support labor rights, support the poor, support disadvantaged groups. So
there are a lot of marginalized groups working, all with very similar messages and similar end goals. What do you think? What do you think could better unite those groups to a bigger cause? I think back to the time of Lincoln and Reconstruction, and he took 7 or so different political parties who never would have worked together, all different self-interests, but they came together. They actually formed the Republican Party, of course, back then, very different looking party than it is today, but still with us. And so my question to you is, what do you think could engender more unity between the marginalized groups?
I think that America needs to move back towards having a much stronger class consciousness. Young people have a much greater degree of class consciousness than middle-aged and older people, because we feel already our rents, the rent is too dang high. I'm gonna keep it clean here.
We were born in it, man.
Yeah, we were born in
raised
it. Yeah, look at it, trying to live. I'm gonna have to live off campus in Asheville, and I'm not looking forward to that. We don't. It's hard for us to find good jobs. We don't have jobs that last long. We've just, economics isn't everything, but economics decides an awful lot of how a human being lives on the planet we are on.
Just about everything in a Western society.
Everything.
Just about every aspect.
Yeah. Try living without money.
There are some intentional communities that are doing just that.
I mean, I'm not going to go into deep, anarcho-communist.
There you go.
Autonomous societies. But
we should talk about that sometime.
That's a whole different pod, folks. It's I think that's why Bernie Sanders resonated with young people so much, because it affects everyone, because a lot of people say, race decides everything, gender decides everything, and I'd say none of those people are wrong, but class is part of it.
Well,
so
I think. No, didn't mean to interrupt.
my one thing is, one line is a lot of people recognize that Hillary sort of incorporate a lot of those kind of identity sort of politics, but that's just because she wants a diverse 5%, not an all-white 1%, and that doesn't help anyone.
Exactly.
So I think we should just move towards more egalitarian society in general.
I mean, like, the conservatives would have people believe that the Bernie Sanders phenomenon was like the grandpa complex, I heard it called. All these millennials, he's like a grandpa to them.
Millennials love old people,
and so
old people are cool as hell.
I honestly think that he was the only candidate in the entire race that represented the millennial interest in any sort of capacity.
Absolutely.
Hillary, what she did, in my opinion, co-opted a lot of the social issues, very poorly, might I add, because her own track record is counter to that. But let's not. I don't want to get into a rant on Hillary, because let's face it, that's not
That's not what we're here about.
Yeah, it's not really.
We live in the here and now.
Exactly, and so, but someone like Bernie Sanders, who represented kind of our voice collectively. Someone like that doesn't come around, as often as the alternative, which would be the status quo, kind of Hillary type person. So what can we do, in your opinion, to raise more leaders, to more accurately show the millennial perspective in a way that unifies us?
That's a really good question, and one that a lot of leftists and have sort of been trying to grapple with since last July. I'd say that get involved locally, because those people eventually run for bigger and bigger offices, and that's how you get people to sort of move towards a national stage.
Okay.
Bernie Sanders was mayor of what's that capital? Baltimore. Right? Wasn't that?
I don't want to speak on it.
He's from Vermont, so, which is not the national stage. You really have to take that path, because you can't just force someone. You can't have a Ross Perot of New Deal liberalism. That's not how it works.
Community plays a big part.
Community plays a huge part. So, I mean, all politics is local. I believe Tipper Gore said that. Tep O'Neill said that. I'm the dumbest guest they will have.
No.
We can cut that out.
Okay, you just bleep it.
Okay. Put in the cue music right there.
So it really does. It start locally. That's not like a hippie thing. That's not that's just how politics works. And the greater that you have, the greater that the numbers of people who organize locally, the greater our overall cohesive organization will be, and the less strain it will take on us as individuals. Because I think a lot of it has been the thing that seems daunting to us everyone says, oh God, this is gonna be so hard. And yeah, I mean, it's gonna be hard.
It's a huge mountain to climb for sure.
It's called, the struggle, man.
But for a reason.
Yeah, but the thing is that if there are enough of us, it's a lot less backbreaking and mind breaking. And I think that's the most important thing, is that we keep it fun. I'm not saying that we should have signs that say, like, Trump is Voldemort, because politics should not be, your pop culture shouldn't be your politics, but I think that you should keep it fun, and in the way that the Air Horn Orchestra, that's...
And just realistic,
Yeah, like, keep it realistic.
Trump is Trump, and we need to address what that really means for us realistically before we can hope to cut through that tape,
Take it one step at a time.
Yeah, you have to be. We live in a society that's so reactive to what's going on. So to have that movement, we first have to identify what the repression is.
Yeah.
We have to identify how we can get together to overcome that. You were mentioning earlier how it's easy to fall in that single mentality and feel how daunting it is. But if you realize that there really is that strength in numbers, that as passionate as you are, the person beside you has that same feeling, that same motivation, that same belief, you're already bigger. The person, two people beside them, having that movement, having that kind of direction, especially with finding a strong leader, someone to get behind who is in the position to make these things actually happen. I feel like is crucial, especially in this time, and with the next 4 years coming up, to really identify what repression is and what we need to stand against.
And I think it's going to take a lot of those types of leaders you just mentioned, not just one or two, but an entire committee or organization, rather, of people like that, our own new world order, per se. No, of course, like, not seriously, but a coalition of people who can really call shots for the greater good, and I don't see that, in America today, it's usually the opposite. It's like you see these people in power in groups, and so they're almost unstoppable, and everything they do is for selfish, some form of self-interest. It's hard to believe the state, from our food industry to our education, is completely out of our control, it seems, and we all know that there's so much room to grow. I don't know. I want to maybe reel it back a little bit and ask you, what motivates you personally?
I'm motivated personally because I don't want to live in a Neil Blomkamp film. I don't want to live in Elysium, where there's just robot cops and rich people are in space, and the rest of us have to live and die of cancer. Because people, my own mother, who is still, says I'm an avowed capitalist, even though she comes out protest, gets arrested. I think I'll bring her over sometime.
Your mom is awesome.
Yeah,
she sounds awesome.
I'm convinced I'll convince her of some deal of market socialism this year. But she recognizes that our kids, she wants grandkids, and I would like one kid and then like a bunch of dogs and cats, but
it's all
relative. But
putting a disclaimer out now for anyone listening.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's looking for a kid, everybody.
I mean, it's still a baby. It's a first step at protesting.
Steal babies.
Yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry. So the thing is that we have to look towards the future. We face a climate crisis that may even be permanent now. We may not be able to bring it back. I mean, there's a good chance that we can't, but I'm not a scientist, so I'm gonna have hope that we can figure something out. We are on, as Bernie said, we're in the greatest level of income inequality since the Gilded Age. And that's not good. That's not sustainable.
Exactly. Sustainability.
It's not sustainable. That's the Asheville thing. And I think that we just need to fix it. And even if there's a 3% chance that we'll come out on top, that we'll have really the outcome we want, we have to fight for that 3%.
You have to go for that because everything is right on that.
The alternative is you don't want to think about it.
It's our destruction, man.
Yeah. So have hope. because it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time. We live, people say, oh, it's a lot of turmoil, but it's never been a more exciting time to be someone who wants real change, because the choice has never been more stark.
Don't be what's left, be what's right, in that sense. Stand behind your morals if you feel like that, and actually go out and make it happen.
Yeah, make it happen.
Spread it too, man. And that's why I'm so glad to be here with you, honestly, because I feel like you have the firsthand experience, and we have the way to spread it. And it's bonds like that engender real change, in my opinion. And I hope that anyone listening takes it very seriously, because this kind of thing, it will play a major part in the success of our future. The next generations, and so I'm proud to be here sitting with you.
Thanks, man. Proud to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, my advice for anyone who's listening to this and is looking to get into protesting, I mean, get on Twitter. Because that's a good place to organize and find out when stuff's going down. If you don't have a DSA chapter, because I'm plugging DSA, follow them, look up their message, look up how they organize, and form one if there's not one in your city. So find the people that are curious about affecting change, and form a nucleus, and from that it'll grow. Don't lose hope.
Mr. Benat Quartararo, thank you so much for coming on our show. And thank you so much for being part of such an important movement.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, man. Just stay active.
Thanks.
All right, howdy. This is James Hughes. Earlier on the podcast, we had Benat here, who was speaking on protest. In the studio, we have Larisa Karr, who's news editor here at the Blue Banner.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Oh yeah, and thank you for so much for coming.
Absolutely.
You read an article in this week's edition of the Banner. Women throughout the world protest Donald Trump's inauguration.
Yes.
I want to start off with a excerpt that you made in the article by Emma Bryant, who was a 37-year-old professor at George Washington University. It's extremely frightening times, and I think we all need to pull together and make a very, very public and strong statement about the fact that we're not going to stand for the kind of changes that President-elect Trump wants to bring in.
Yes.
What specifically motivated you to participate in this worldwide event?
Well, I was initially not going to go, and then I had a conversation with my friend, and she was like, "We're going to the Women's March on Washington." I said to her, "Oh, I would really like to go." The reason I wasn't going to go was because I didn't have a way of getting there. But I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to protest. I've done my fair share of protesting, and I would much prefer to cover the event from an objective journalistic standpoint. Excuse me. And I really just wanted to go there. I knew it was going to be momentous. I knew it was going to be, a really incredible gathering of people. And you don't get that opportunity that often to take pictures and to talk to people who are coming out from all different political perspectives. So I wanted to go. I wanted to be there. I wanted to cover it. I wanted to see. I wanted to hear. I wanted to talk to people, just find out what the mood of the country was like.
And do you feel like approaching the protest with that sense of an impartial view, do you feel like you had a different experience than most people who were actually participating in the rally aspect of it?
Absolutely. The people that I went with were not eager to talk to Trump supporters. I had people even on the newspaper staff who were like, "I'm going to give you a taser," and all this stuff. And I wasn't afraid to talk to them. I actually wanted to get inside their head and pick their brain a little bit and just, find out what's going on, why are these people thinking this way? What is their motivation? Why do they keep repeating, "He's going to make America great again"? So it was more of me wanting to sort of get inside the head of people that I disagreed with. But the people I went with were definitely like vehemently passionate about protesting. They were incredibly emotional throughout the event. And I think being not disconnected, because as a journalist, I have my perspective, which veers toward the far, far left. But I wanted to go to cover it, to give people a sense of what it was like. I didn't just want to take pictures of the protesters. I wanted to take pictures of the supporters and show, wow, like, this is the crowd that came out. This is what they look like. This is what they're acting like.
You wanted to experience the people more than the event in that sense.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a pretty good preconceived notion of at least what the general outcome is going to be, or at least what the people there are going to be like. Was that pretty true in what you thought going into it once you actually got there?
No, it wasn't. The protesters, yeah. There were a lot of factors involved. First off, the Trump supporters, I was expecting them to be very angry. Based on what people were telling me, I was expecting them to be very aggressive, I had one friend who told me, don't go because you have silver hair, you look like a Hillary supporter, and they'll attack you for that and all this stuff. And I had a lot of people urging me not to go for that reason. And I found the majority, like the Trump supporters I spoke to, were very jovial, very eager to talk. Like, if we weren't talking about Trump, you would think, like, we were having a conversation about the weather or about something like, super normal. And that's the way they viewed it, as being normal. I didn't betray my viewpoint on it just because I didn't really feel like getting in an argument. But I found all of the Trump supporters I interviewed were super, super nice. And I only saw one instance of heckling, and I didn't even see it. Someone pointed it out to me, said, "Did you see those Trump people heckling that protester?" But what was really interesting was how the media portrayed it to be. I was in an area where there were a lot of protesters. I was primarily with the protesters all day on the day of the inauguration, but there were a lot of Trump people walking through there, so that's where I got the chance to talk to them. And the media portrayed it as, riots and, like, burning and all this stuff. I didn't see any of that. Like, there was no evidence any of that was happening in D.C. Surprisingly, the protesters kept their distance from the Trump supporters. The Trump supporters just sort of passed on, didn't really communicate. They made faces a couple times, but there wasn't really I didn't really see any aggressive behavior. It was really weird. And the Trump supporters were just talking about unity, bringing America together, and all this stuff. And I was really shocked by that because, that's obviously with what he's doing right now with the immigration and everything. He's not about bringing people together, but the Trump supporters were really gung-ho on that message. And I thought that was interesting that they almost thought he fostered this sense of peace, which is kind of contradictory to Donald Trump in general.
So it sounds like on that point, the Trump supporters were set on one idea of what Trump represented.
Yeah.
The people protesting against Trump were also on their own idea of what they were protesting.
Yeah.
It sounds reassuring, though, that at least both sides are tiptoeing around the same message of unity.
Yeah.
Do you think there is that common ground that we can build on as people under the government?
I think so. I think, I talked to people who were working class who were like, Donald Trump gave my friends jobs. And I realized a lot of them were just, blue collar folks. Donald Trump gave them, a sense of economic optimism. And I think that if you look at like the percentage of people who voted for Obama in 2012 in counties that went blue, you had counties that went majority red in this election. And I think it was because of the fact that he was appealing to so many like working class voters. And I definitely feel there is like a potential sense of wanting to work together.
Yeah, especially if some of the promises that he's making don't really come true a little bit later on. That distrust in the government, especially that happened within the 8 years of Obama's terms.
Yeah.
I feel like will reflect even more, because at this point, the savior was the Republican from the Democratic ideology, from not paying as close attention to the people or to the blue collar sense. Mm-hmm. So if these promises don't come through, I feel like there's going to be that unifying, the government really isn't helping us aspect.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the spin that the media gave on the rallies and the protests. I know a lot of more conservative news networks, loosely using the words news when I say networks.
Yeah, you gotta do that.
They painted the rallies as very vulgar. They highlighted a lot of signs that you typically, or they were saying, isn't children appropriate or child appropriate. Did you see anything along those lines that you felt like was crossing the line?
I mean, you had a lot of references to pussy at Women's March. There were a lot of signs like, don't grab this pussy. And I don't think that's an inappropriate word.
Especially since, the president used it so freely.
Yeah, exactly. He was pretty liberal in his usage of it. And, if a child can turn on the TV and watch Fox News with their parents, then, why shouldn't women have the right to say that word?
If it's too much out of protest, it should be too much for the president.
Yeah, exactly. They were sending a message to him saying, we heard what you said and we're going to respond.
Speaking of sending a message, I know, just to highlight one celebrity that was active during the protest, Madonna.
Yeah.
And she seemed very adamant, very strong choice of words towards both Trump and also the White House. It even garnished a response from Trump, who mentioned having celebrities active during protests diminish the value and the meaning. Do you see any validity in that aspect, or is that just Trump, do you feel like, trying to push the attention elsewhere? I
think people want to hear about celebrities. I think as a culture we're very obsessed with celebrities, and I think Trump knows that.
He's our celebrity president.
Exactly. He's Hollywood, Mr. Hollywood in chief. And in terms of Madonna, I think she's always going to be controversial. She's just notorious for that. She's notorious for doing like really dumb things, like making out with Drake, even though she's like 60, and like, I think she was just looking for something to say, just, to garner some sort of attention. I do think that Trump used that, like you said, to detract from the message. I was a little bit surprised when I read his tweet, where one of his first sentences in his tweet was speaking out against the Women's March, and then the other sentence was about celebrities. And when we were there, maybe it was because we couldn't move during the Women's March, it was so populated, but virtually the celebrities, we had no access visually or audibly to the celebrities that were speaking. So in terms of the Women's March, they didn't really exist for me. They weren't a key component of my experience or of the other people's experience I went with. I watched the news and I saw, the celebrity said this, Madonna said this. And I wish I had heard her speak, because I love Madonna. She is a huge inspiration to me. But at the same time, I was shocked to see, not shocked, I was surprised to hear him say that, because I was like, okay, you're going to talk about celebrities, but you're not going to talk about upset you are about the Women's March, like, that's kind of detracting from the point of it.
And if anything, because there was such a success, not just in the United States or here in Asheville, but across the world with the Women's March, that could have been his way of, because it was so impactful, trying to desensitize really what the message was. Being a part of all of that, do you really feel like the purpose was really fulfilled of the protests and of the rallies?
I have mixed emotions about it. I did not, absolutely not vote for Hillary. I am a socialist, so I voted for Jill Stein. You saw a lot of Hillary supporters. It was primarily white women, older white women that came out, some older white men. And that was the predominant demographic at the event, at the Women's March. And that's fine. I mean, I had a feeling that these people otherwise would not have mobilized had Hillary Clinton won. But at the same time, you didn't see a whole lot of people from other races, other ethnicities. There were a few signs talking about intersectional feminism, feminism for transgender individuals who are otherwise acknowledged or persecuted, and for being female. And you didn't really see a lot of that. And, you know, it was just a bunch of people being like, oh, this buffoon won. Let's take signs and take to the streets. Which, I mean, to me, the most inspiring thing was the crowd. Like, by far, even if there were some downsides, the fact that many people, like, literally, I was afraid of not breathing at one point. There were so many people. I got pushed into a trash can. You couldn't move. The group I was with kept trying to push forward, and it just got to the point where we gave up because there were so many people for miles and miles. And that was inspiring, I'm not going to lie. I think the fact that people are feeling, okay, this president does not represent what we stand for, I think is a sign of optimism.
And we've clearly shown that we have the power of unifying.
Yeah.
It's blatantly obvious with the tremendous turnout. What do you think the next step is? Because I feel like we're lacking that direction. We all unified for that idea,
yeah.
But we need that revolt. I guess what I'm trying to say is it seems like so much of our nation, so much of our political system is reactive rather than proactive.
Exactly.
And having this many people come together was more of a reactive stance of what was happening with Trump. What would you feel like would be the next step for us to make a real change in a proactive standpoint?
You know, that's a really good question. That's the reason, and this is going to be a bit of a tangent, but that's the reason I stopped protesting primarily. It's because I felt it was reactive. You know, like there's protests on UNCA's campus, and I go there and people are taking pictures and the news is there and they're like, oh, look at these little college kids protesting. And like I felt it was more like a show, you know. And I feel like protests, like, it's debatable whether or not they actually achieve something. It's I think people are going to have to sock it to them where it hurts, whether it's Latino workers taking a day off and not working for a day and showing how much of the American economy is reliant on Latino individuals, Black individuals doing the same thing. I think there needs to be something, like you said, very proactive, a stance, protesting outside the White House. I mean, you go to D.C. I went to D.C. almost 2 years ago, and to protest, it was for a pro-immigration divestment and Black Lives Matter protest. And the person told me, and this was during Obama's administration, he said, they're not going to arrest us, even though we were outside the White House, because he said there are dozens of protests going on in D.C. every day. And that kind of, you know, spoke to me. I was like, you know, like, this is something, does protesting actually work? You have to go to the source of power. I think the key with it is in the young generation. I think in our generation, people are a lot more aware. They're a lot more aware of the Black liberation movement. They're a lot more aware of transgender rights. They're a lot more aware of women's rights. And I think they have to go to the source of the power. If the city of Asheville is, and this is a complete tangent, but like most of my thoughts are, but if the city of Asheville has a corrupt water system where certain people are in power who are getting a lot of money from the water system, then you have to go and you have to storm City Hall.
Let's talk about Flint, Michigan, if we're going to hit the whole water source.
Yeah.
3 years, still no clean water.
Yeah.
And, I feel like you hit the nail on the head, especially when you're talking about minority workers or Hispanic workers taking a day off. That kind of action on one end will put production back, or it'll put efficiency back. But on the flip side, it forces you to realize what else is there. I feel like protesting, like you were talking about, it shows that we can unify behind one common idea.
Yeah.
Once we unify behind that idea, we need that action to create that change. And so, I don't really know if there's a question to that. That was more of a statement, but
that's awesome. I think that's a really good point. And I think it's, the United States is a capitalistic society, and if you can get to the source of that power, take on capitalism and attack it and show that, in the case of Latino workers taking a day off, protest and say, we're not going to do this, the United States would suffer for that day, and, the Dow Jones would be down and everything would be off balance, and they would say, wait, why are they doing this? Like, this could happen more and more. And I think it's important to tackle the capitalistic root of things. Like, once you start addressing money, and that's where everything is.
It's the root of all evil.
Indeed.
And then just to kind of bring things roughly to a close here, I'm just going to end on a line that you wrote, and I'm going to have you just kind of comment on it.
Yeah.
The participants of the march, however, remain eager to keep that momentum going and put up a fight.
Yeah.
What do you think round 2 will be? This just seemed like it was maybe a jab brushed off by Trump, so I feel like we have to start getting closer to haymakers if we're going to make any kind of change.
Yeah.
What's going to be that big punch?
That's also a really good question. I don't know. Like, I think at this point, I think people have to go to Washington. They have to, be aware of the people that are the middlemen in power, speak out against them. It's more the people behind the scenes than it is Trump, the puppet figure. They have to basically be more aware of the issues, and I don't know, that's a tough question. I feel like we're right on the cusp of something that's never happened in the United States before. I feel like the 1960s were close, and I feel like this could be potentially more exciting than the 60s because of the fact, like, and this is another tangent, but you look primarily at what created change. You think back to the civil rights movement. You think back to Black people coming in and sitting at the counters and saying, we're not going to move. That's action. I think something has to happen. I don't know, like, obviously storming the White House is not going to fly with the snipers on the roof and everything. But
oh, yeah. Or a drone strike.
Yeah, a drone strike, a bulldozer, Tiananmen Square style. I know people are writing to their elected representatives more. I think they have to show up. They have to show up at courthouses. They have to start, being vocal and being present at the same time. They have to show, because you can write letters, but I don't think that gets anything done.
Because they also have paper shredders.
Yeah, so. Exactly. I think they have to show up. They have to not only care about, care about the mainstream politicians, they have to care about local politics. And as to what can happen, I don't know. What do you think? What do you think is the next step?
Honestly, I feel like just staying active, not being okay and writing off everything that's you feel unhappy with. It's a systematic line that gets drawn and then erased, and then drawn, then erased, then drawn, then erased. Staying present and just understanding that when you feel any kind of repression or you feel any kind of coming down from the government, you're not the only person feeling that way. Mm-hmm. And so by you vocalizing your opinion, there's strength in solidarity, or how do you say it? There's strength in numbers. And so if the person beside you feels the same way, the person beside them feels the same way, you can then carry that momentum into something else. This march has really been, I feel like, a defining moment of our generation.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we can continue on these positive strides to keep the United States, to keep our country what we the people feel like it should be, and not what public or self-interest or
big pharma,
big companies, oil companies, anything like that who have the money, keeping them out of control, or at least keeping them in check.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to have to create, there's going to have to be a lot more awareness, but somehow action has to be taken. I'm not sure what kind of action that would be.
I feel like it'll present itself. That moment will be known, and that action will be clear when that time comes. Because we were talking about being proactive and reactive. When you're proactive, there's a million possibilities you have to prepare for.
Yeah.
When you're reactive, you're responding to that one defining substance. So being aware and staying aware of these actions, and I feel like that defining moment will be present.
Yeah, absolutely.
But all right, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate not only you being an active part of our society who is trying to get things done, but also coming in and taking your time to share your opinion, and hopefully inspiring someone else to go out there and make a change.
I hope so. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
All right, glad to hear. Thank you.
Thanks.
You've been listening to the B3 Podcast. I'm Nick Strauss signing off.
And I'm James Hughes. Thanks for listening.